If you've asked Claude or ChatGPT to think about your marketing strategy or figure out your business model, you probably got a plan that sounds pretty smart. But according to new research from NYU's Stern School of Business, you might be falling for trend slop. If you're like me and running a solo business, I know how hard it is to find people to talk to about strategy stuff who get it. And I know you don't have time to waste second guessing like which AI you should be using for this. You just need to know which one is going to give you the best answers and what you need to do so you can make decisions based on that advice. So, today we're going to look at those test results on how AIs perform on business strategy questions. We're going to look at OpenAI's ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, and Google Gemini. And we're going to break down what they're good at strategically, what you can count on, and where you need to be skeptical. And we're also going to identify which one is going to be best for your overall strategic needs. Okay, so I've opened up three windows in my browser: ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to toggle on incognito in each of these because I don't want its memory to influence the answers. I'm just going to paste this in from something I had earlier. So do not use any context you have about me to answer this question. I'm a PR consultant for the luxury hospitality industry. I would like to generate more leads. Should I niche down? So let's paste that into each of our windows. And let's go ahead and get them working on the problem. ChatGPT is ready first, so let's see. It says yes, but probably not by choosing a smaller industry. It says luxury hospitality, already a meaningful niche. Niche down around client, business moment, geography, giving it a stronger positioning statement, more compelling than PR for luxury hospitality. So more or less it is saying yes, niche down, but here are some questions you might want to consider. Now let's see what Google says. Google says you're already in a niche, but you might need to niche down for your positioning rather than your industry target. So again, a very similar answer. And let's see what Claude had to say. Great question. The short answer is probably yes, but the way you niche matters more than whether you niche. In ChatGPT's response, we see down here that it recommends looking at openings as a possibility, right? Specializing as a PR consultant in luxury resort openings. Gemini gives an example, flagship grand openings. Claude talks right here about independent luxury hotels launching or repositioning. So I just want to point out that if you were in a room brainstorming with people who may or may not know anything about the luxury PR hospitality niche, you might get people thinking, oh, what about openings? Because it's kind of obvious. And part of the point of niching is really to differentiate yourself. So I'm not sure that any of our AI friends are giving us the kind of left field insight that might be really useful. Now, one thing I don't want to lose here is that niching down is not necessarily wrong or bad advice. So, 95% of the time, it is the right answer, and your business will get benefit from it in terms of clarity and clients. But what if you're in the 5% who doesn't need to do it? So, niche has come up in my calls with two different people in the last month. One is a master storyteller. She's got years of experience, but she's a relatively new consulting business. So I absolutely recommended she niche down. But the other person I spoke with is a business coach with a mature consulting business and a steady stream of referrals. So I told her it was okay if she didn't niche down as long as the referrals she was getting represented the kinds of people she wanted to work with, and she wasn't necessarily trying to stand out on social media to attract inbound. So my niche recommendation changed based on the business goal, the marketing strategy, and the maturity of the business. So clearly, business strategy depends on nuance, and the most common answer isn't always the right one. Now, I'm going to go back to our demo, and I want to show you something that might freak you out a little. So I'm just going to paste a new prompt here because you don't need to watch me type. Now make the strongest possible case for the opposite, that I should stay broad. And I'm going to go ahead and set that off. Go over to Gemini, do the same thing, come on over to Claude and do the same thing. And now let's see if ChatGPT has an answer for us yet. So the strongest case for staying broad is that luxury hospitality PR is already specialized enough. And now it's giving you the opposite argument around why you should not niche down. More shots on the goal, value range, breadth. You can benefit from cross referrals. So, again, a very strong recommendation for going the other way. Gemini, the exclusivity ceiling, avoiding the conflict trap, broader media relationships, seasonal hedging. Let's see what Claude has to say. Fair enough. Here's the Steelman case for staying broad. And again, is coming up with a very confident sounding analysis here. So, my point in showing you that is just to show you how confidently AI can argue in either direction. And so, when we're talking about strategy, which has a lot of moving parts, which has a lot of nuance, it's really important that you flip your brain back on and really participate in the rigor of this decision making yourself. So, a quick recap of the research that was published in Harvard Business Review. So, the researchers ran over 1,000 tests on all different kinds of businesses, different sizes, different industries, different situations. And what they found is when it comes to strategy, all the major models tend to make the same recommendations. So, the answers that you're getting to your business questions are not actually customized at all. I'm going to drop a link to this article in the description so you can dive in for yourself if you want to. But I also know that 90% of solo business operators feel isolated because we don't have a sounding board. So we don't want to lose AI as a stand-in for that. It's just too hard to bounce ideas off yourself. It's great to have a thought partner. So what are we supposed to do about this? I don't want to go back to feeling like I have no one to bounce things off of, but I also want to be confident that I can make good decisions based on those conversations. So, at the beginning of this video, I promised you a recommendation as to which AI is going to give you the best answers and what you need to do to feel confident making decisions based on that advice. So, I'm going to answer the second part first because this is true of all three platforms we're talking about today. Number one, you are the expert. AI is great at offering alternatives and scenarios. It's great at finding data, but you are the decision maker. So it's important that we use AI for what it's best at. The first thing that comes to mind is just brainstorming. It's really good at generating a large volume of ideas in a short amount of time. And you don't have to invite a bunch of people over and give them a glass of wine to get those ideas, right? And so, as you're looking through the ideas, I want you to look for the outliers because that's probably where the real value comes in. Another thing it's really good at is generating different scenarios, like gaming out what different solutions and outcomes might look like. So, if I were to niche down to this very narrow area, how is that going to impact my business in the near term, in the midterm, and in the long term? Or if I were to raise my prices, what might that do to my overall revenue in the short term, the midterm, and long term? And what that will do to my profitability, right? Because we need to look at both. One way to get clarity when you're talking about scenarios is ask for unexpected or unpopular ideas to sort of force it away from the statistical center. That's one way you can manipulate how the algorithm gives you answers. Another place I really like to use AI for myself and for my clients is in competitive research. So, as I said before, there's not tons of data about like the best path to follow if you're building a solo business, but we're also not reinventing the wheel, right? Plenty of people have been successful doing this before us. At the end of the day, selling expertise is a well lit path, right? And there is nothing wrong with following somebody else's playbook to success, but you just want to make sure it fits where you are. The biggest mistake I see is when people look at someone who's farther down the road than they are and they try to adapt those strategies to their business. Strategy is going to look very different in terms of both tactics and in terms of what it looks like if you're successful, if you're in year three of your business versus you're in year 10 of your business, or whether or not you've just made a pivot, or even if you're doing $150,000 a year versus $500,000 a year. So there are some things you can do to set yourself up for success when you're using AI for strategy. First, give it as much of your context as you can. So I help all my clients create a business file and I just have it live with their brand voice file and their ICP file, their ideal client profile. And this gives the AI a better understanding of the big picture, which is really important when you're formulating strategy. And then the other thing I would really recommend is don't take what they say first as the last word. So the best CEOs surround themselves with people who offer not only different operational viewpoints, so a chief marketing officer, a financial officer, often a lawyer, someone who's in IT, right? Who can help them look at a problem through the lenses of different specialties. But they also often surround themselves with people who are willing to challenge them, people who just see things differently. Some people are really data driven, some people are really vision driven. And as a decision maker in a strategy situation, what you really want is a lot of different inputs before you decide what that path is that you want to follow. So let me give you some prompts you can use, regardless of which platform you're on, that are going to help you get to a better decision. I'm going to put all of these in the description. This first one I call the reversal, and we're going to do exactly what I did in the demo. You're going to ask it to make the strongest possible case for the opposite course of action. So whatever it recommended, tell it to make a case for the opposite. And if it can make an equally strong case for either side, you clearly either need more data or you need to ask more questions. This next one I call the bias check. What would you tell me if the popular answer is exactly wrong for my situation? What about my business needs to be true in order for this to work for me? And this makes it name the conditions, and now you can decide whether or not your business fits that model, right? Another one you can try is the crowd test. I actually used this one a year ago when I was looking at some different tools that I could build. I said, is this the advice you would give most businesses like mine? And then what would the 10% who shouldn't follow it look like? So the answer that comes back that's really polished and really obvious, that's the one that's probably giving everybody else in your niche. And then the final one I would use is the boardroom. And this is the one I referenced earlier. It's a little bit more complex, but go ahead and ask it to consider the situation from a COO, a CMO, a CFO, and a CIO, and to give you a recommendation for each one. And then as the CEO, the final decision is really yours. So I still owe you an answer as to which platform you can reliably depend on for strategy questions. So I'll start by telling you what I do. I use all three and then I challenge the output with questions like the ones I just gave you, okay? And then I process all of that and try to pick out the best course of action. But if that's too much information for you and too much fiddling, which I get, let's go back to our strategy use cases and look at which platforms are going to be better for which things. For brainstorming, I got to go with ChatGPT. It's really good at generating a lot of ideas quickly. I don't know if you could tell it on the demo I did earlier, but ChatGPT's answer came back faster than the other two by a long shot. So I think the biggest watch out with chat is that it's also going to be your biggest cheerleader, and it is going to tell you that what you've got is a great idea, regardless of what you ask it. So you just really have to be careful that you don't just sort of go, ooh, that was a good idea. And ChatGPT thought it was a good idea. So it must be a good idea, right? You have to realize it's a suck up. It's trying to get promoted. And you probably need to bring a naysayer into that conversation. For getting out of the box and coming up with scenarios that you haven't necessarily thought about before, I really like Gemini for this. It just seems to be better at bringing in ideas, kind of those ones that come in from left field, and then you can build on that. I think the watch out with Gemini is that it asks so many questions and it is so willing to go in different directions that you can end up overthinking everything and not making a decision. I'm an overthinker, and that is one of the traps that I can fall into when I'm using Gemini is I get all caught up in this way or that way. And then I don't take action. And let me be clear, you can strategize with any AI model you want all day long. You can spend all day, every day thinking about strategy. Unless you're taking action, your business just isn't going to change. So that's probably the most important thing I could say this entire video. Now, for overall versatility and just logical reasoning, I would go with Claude because it can hold lots of information at one time. And it seems to be the most willing of all of them to push back and drive towards a decision. So if Chat is the cheerleader and Gemini resists decision making, Claude is willing to get in there and point out the risks and make a recommendation. So at this point, I hope I've convinced you that it's really important that you process all of the information in order to get the best strategy for your individual business. And if you're currently using AI to work on your marketing strategy and you want to employ AI to help you execute on that strategy, this is the video you want to watch next.